Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast with me, Joshua Jackson. This podcast, just like the Leaders Council itself, is all about recognising and celebrating the people who keep this country running. We exist to give leaders a voice outside of their own organisation and to support them in the same way they support their staff every single day of the week. If you're in a leadership position yourself and would like to have your voice heard on the national stage, please go to leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. I am delighted to say that joining me on today's show is Ayesha Vardag, the founder and president of the leading UK and international family law firm, Vardags. Well known for representing high and ultra-high net worth clientele through complex cases and frequently across multiple territories. Ayesha is frequently referred to as Britain's top divorce lawyer, and she is famed for impacting change on UK legislation, forward-thinking acumen, and fearless compassion and logic. Ayesha, welcome to the programme, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem at all. It's really great to hear from top leaders in their fields, and obviously you've been called the UK's top divorce lawyer and have also been hailed by Time magazine as the diva of divorce. As a leader in your field within your own rights, when we think of the word leadership, what does that really mean to you, and what, in your opinion, does make somebody a good leader?
It's an interesting question. I think there are sort of two big elements to it. One is just a willingness, an ability to, and a willingness to make decisions. So you've got to see a situation and you've got to analyze it and assess it. And then you've got to be willing to make the decision, because so often you'll see, well, there's pros and cons of this and that. And you don't know, there are so many variables, you don't know which way to go. But you have to have that sense of, right, I'm just going to go this way. I'm going to trust my decision and I'm going to go with it. And that is a very hard thing to do. That's one of the most stressful things I find in leadership, is just being the person that the buck stops with and that has to make the hard decision. The other thing, I think, is almost a sense, almost a kind of tribal sense of commitment. You have to feel very, very strong, a very strong sense of being in a team and wanting to bring that team forward. And, you care about your tribe, your family, your community, whatever you've created. And then that creates a really deep commitment to wanting to protect and look after all the people in that. And that, and to push the team that they're all part of with you forward, and to do that, in a way that's completely integrated with it and leading from the front. So it's that deep commitment to your little group, your organization, your entity, that's fundamental too. You have to care. And in so many of these things, I've always said, commitment is all. Without commitment, people don't invest in you. You don't invest in other people. You can't make any sort of long-term plan. So that deep sense of commitment is fundamental.
I think that's an incredibly introspective way of looking at sort of leadership there. You're right on all of those cases. You do need to be able to be sort of forthright and have conviction in your direction, but also bringing everybody else alongside you as well. You can't just be overbearing or forceful with the way that you treat your team. They have to believe in that as well and believe in you as an individual. And, by the fact that you're recognizing that, I really do think that's a perfect sign of somebody that does have the right sort of attributes and a way to go, really. But now everybody has to start their particular journey somewhere. For you studied English literature and law at Cambridge, and you also studied European law in Brussels for a year. Then your early days in the legal sector or research, international nuclear energy law, and then after that, you were involved in the legal side of project finance into multi-billion-dollar power stations, diamond mines. What really brought around the motivation for you to change the direction towards divorce and family law?
It was one of those very happy accidents where things going wrong in your life actually lead you to the place that you really prefer to be. I had my marriage break down very sadly. And while I was in the midst of doing all this sort of quite high-powered legal finance and commercial stuff, And then over the course of working my own divorce case with my divorce lawyer, I got very involved because I was a lawyer. I wanted to save costs and do things faster. So I did a lot of the work. I got involved in a lot of the work. And then after my case was all over, he hired me. And because I found it so interesting working through my own, I mean, incredibly stressful, but interesting. And I saw how what you're doing there is dealing with people's lives and their stories, and you're trying to sort of capture the essence of their stories and their lives and put them across to a judge who's then going to work it all out and within the parameters of the law, hopefully give your client what they want and need. It was just such an interesting juxtaposition of the legal and intellectual and the profoundly human. And also, I mean, family law is about the most important things in our lives. It's about sex and love and homes and children and, the things that really affect us on the most visceral level rather than, financial structures and all of that, which gives some indirect benefit to people, but there's not that sense that you're making a huge difference to someone's life. So yeah, after he hired me, I worked for him for a while, then did some time at Queen Mary's, 5-star law school, teaching teaching academically, so that I'd get a sense of being totally across every aspect of family law. And then I set up my firm back in 2005.
It's as you say, a very happy accident there, and obviously family does. Yeah. It really is the bedrock of community, and then community is then how we all interact and the foundation of the way we do things, and obviously the legal parameters around that. So really, it is at its most basic level the most important part of almost everything that society does. So a really interesting journey, and one that I'm sure we'll go into in a bit more detail. But when obviously you were starting out and you made this change in your focus, but you were already, an accomplished lawyer. Did you know early on in your sort of legal career that you wanted to launch your own firm one day, or again, was that something that just came to be?
No, I never considered myself an entrepreneurial person or somebody that would have their own business. I was brought up with very strong focus on education. You get yourself super educated. You then get into the best institution you can, and you work your way up to leadership within an existing institution, whatever that is, whether it's political or government or law or whatever. That was very much the perspective I was brought up with, and the whole idea of being an entrepreneur was sort of, I would never have thought that this would be of interest to me, partly because I find it very difficult in the sort of rather British way to sell, or certainly to sell myself. It's got easier over the years, but it's much easier I find it much easier just to talk about what I'm doing or what I can do about something. But the whole idea of having any kind of sales role always just really put me off. And also the idea of sort of the huge financial risk. I came from a very sort of financially insecure setup when I was young, and so the idea of that much risk was terrifying. But I just effectively fell into it because, again, after when I was doing the academic work, I sort of realized, look, I need to kind of do some more to generate some more to support my, another child that I had. And I looked at what my options were out there in the market. And I started the whole process of, applying to law firms again. And I felt so depressed at the prospect because I'd had really quite difficult experiences. I think it's got a lot better now, but certainly at that time, as a woman with children, you were seen as, just the worst kind of employment risk ever. Women were okay, but they were all expected to drop off and disappear as soon as they had children. And so I repeatedly encountered people saying, oh, I can't see how you could make it in, this profession or this organization as a divorced mother, or, oh, this job that you've been offered, I want to put it on hold until after you've had your leave, even though I was proposing to have like a 3-week maternity leave. And then consistently, I have to really taken long maternity leave, and taken like 5 weeks, or later 3 months. Very very short period of maternity leave. The last time before last, I had actually no maternity leave. I was in the office the next day. But there's this presumption that if you've got children as a woman, you'll kind of be a bit half-baked about it all, because and you won't be such a serious or committed player as a man would be in the same job. And that's very annoying as a woman who does give her all to her work. But the idea of going back into all of that again and coming up against all those sort of grumpy old old sort of people who would have these kind of presumptions about me. It was so depressing that I just thought, right, I want to try and do things better and differently myself. I want to try and bring a higher level of quality to the field. And having had a city background, I felt I had something really new to bring to what had in the past been a bit of a sort of moribund field in many ways, and didn't have that sort of city quality, and had only recently become a field that to some extent across really widely merited that level of quality, because it was from 2000 that it became this 50-50 split of assets. It became a huge money field that would have a massive impact on people. But the field hadn't really caught up with that. So I wanted to bring city expertise to that new big ticket area of the law. And I felt that I could bring that, and that was a unique USP. And the academic knowledge I had of family law, as well as the experience I'd had in practice, but I'd really bring something unique. And I thought, right, time to just grab the moment and do it. And then, at the time, there was that song by Gwen Stefani out there that basically goes, "What you waiting for? What you waiting for?" And this was playing all the time on the radio. And I kind of thought, and I keep hearing it. Like, no, what are you waiting for? Now is the time to sort of actually see if you can do the things you think you can do, and just have the courage to take the lead. The other thing was there was that other film, generally I think quite a dull film, with Kevin Costner, about building a baseball park in his farm to sort of save the farm.
Okay.
And it's called The Field. And he keeps having this sort of voice telling him, if you build it, they will come. And my biggest fear was that I'll put this whole law firm together and then I won't have any clients and everybody else will laugh at me. And but then I kept listening to this, right, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. And then that's how it sort of started up. But it was really in my spare room, in my house in Islington. I didn't have any, investment or anything like that. I didn't borrow. And I just kind of built it all up, sort of step by step, myself. And first of all, it was, me and the cat and a little, home printer, and running up, all around doing everything myself. Then, after a few months, I had my first employee, which was in itself was, pretty scary, because then you become responsible for other people. And now, now it's come up to over 100 people, and it's the biggest family law firm. But it has been a very organic, slow, steady growth. I've never wanted to borrow. I've never wanted to take investment. I just always wanted to keep just growing according to what we could afford. And so I've been quite a cautious entrepreneur, I suppose, in lots of ways. But it is always for everyone that big initial leap of thinking, can I actually make this a reality? And I was lucky in that I did.
And I think we can all agree that when you look back on this, it has been a real, positive, a real benefit, and you are leading by example, regardless of whether, as you say, when you started, leadership was a particular thing that you could do, or selling yourself or selling the company was something you can do. Looking back, you've obviously grown as a person and grown the company alongside. And there's an awful lot of people out there that have taken notes and seen the quality and the sort of glass ceiling that you've smashed. And that really is something that, is to be celebrated and thought well of. But, when you were starting out, when you were starting the company, were there, any people or, experiences that helped shape you into where you are today? Was there a support level there for you?
I think that there wasn't a female role model out there for me because of my particular situation as a woman with children, starting up from in what was quite a conventional and sort of in many ways old-fashioned profession, and trying to do things in a new way. There wasn't a role model near me that I could find. But what I found was a really valuable experience in helping with leadership and helping with sort of asserting myself the world as well was actually motherhood. Because if you're a single mother and you've got two little boys who are very lively and you're going around everywhere with them, you have to become quite sort of forceful and strong. You have to become very conscious about being fair and being moderate and being steady and dealing with very stressful situations and thinking, right, okay, here's our plan. This is what we're going to do. And there's nobody to help you. And you just work it all out. And also you manage people with their strops and their dissensions between them. And you just learn to become very, very assertive, quite bossy sometimes, and just very strong in making a clear plan. And that was, so often I find you'll have a bunch of people who are sort of bickering about something or getting into difficulties, and I'll say, look, no, right, stop it, stop all this. This is what we need to do. And that's so much easier because of having had years of doing that with my children. So I think motherhood is a very good prep for going into business and going into leadership and management.
Well, there's two things there that then I'd like to sort of touch on, really. One is the sort of outside, belief that you can be you've got a no-nonsense style, that's your way of doing things. That influences the way that you lead and the way that you work. Is that something that you think is accurate? And, when you...
Yes, I think that's absolutely accurate. I always listen. And I'm always really interested in hearing what other people have to say and hearing input. But I believe actually that leadership needs a strong decision-making center. Of course, you delegate things to the people throughout the pyramid, as it were, to the level of responsibility that's right for them. But ultimately, you need somebody who's just going to say, right, I've heard everything, I've thought about all of it, and this is what we're going to do. Otherwise, you have this sort of endless government by committee and nobody can decide, and you end up with the lowest common denominator, just the thing that nobody strongly objects to. And that's not a good way to end up, because you then end up with a very bland, very banal organization that remains, where staying the same is always the default. So it doesn't really move forward and doesn't really adapt, and there's no room for innovation. So I've always believed, you need very, obviously you need kindly, collaborative and listening leadership, but you do need strong leadership. Otherwise, you and your organization, you don't make progress.
Absolutely. Again, how we've said, the buck will be stopping with the leader, but there needs to be that drive and that focus on the future. And I'm sure that's what is coming across. And we've spoken a little bit. You've touched on the fact that you started the business to get out of the traditional, but also to support your family, wanting to take that step. And having a work-life balance, especially given the last 18 months, has become something that people are wanting and seeing as much more important. And how important do you think that is in your particular view?
I think work-life balance is incredibly important, but equally, I think it's extremely difficult to obtain. And I'm not going to pretend to anyone that I have managed to find, the magic formula for doing it. I have been much more someone who has been very intensely in my work for long periods, and then being able to draw back a bit when things are running and let things run with other people a bit more, and then have to be back in intensely again. In the quieter times, I'm able to spend more time with my family. In the more intense, hectic times over my career, frequently I haven't been able to spend much time with them because I've been, out sort of on networking parties till 2 a.m. and then starting work on my cases at 5 or 6. And, it's been so intense. There hasn't really been any time for anything, or I've had to lock myself away in a room at the top of my office, literally for 3 weeks to write an incredibly complex affidavit. And I just sort of didn't come out. I ordered food and just sat there for 3 weeks and wrote this kind of masterwork. And so I've had to do that from time to time. I've always had, in consequence of that, 24/7 childcare at least as a backup, effectively. Even if I had to use it, haven't had to use it, and it goes with the nature of work that's potentially 24/7 as well. That you need that, but equally, there have been long periods when I have been able to come out, spend more time with them, go and have long holidays together. And actually, as a family, we're extremely, extremely close, and we do a lot of things together. So it's been a funny old balance. I haven't done many school runs, or not for long periods of my life. And I've made every sort of play or performance or anything big like that, but I haven't been around at the school gates, and that was just one of the sacrifices I've had to make, which lots of people I think would frown upon me for. But interestingly, they don't really frown upon it when it's a man that's doing that. So there we go. But one way or another, it seems to have worked in that I think, I find my kids to be absolutely fantastic and really lovely, and we are all very close to each other, and and so far so good. But of course, long periods of my time, I've spent I've been in a state of guilt of thinking I'm not spending enough time with them, I'm not seeing them enough, we're not close enough, I'm having to delegate my life to other people, and that that's really obviously not good. But had I not done that, I wouldn't have been able to build something which now is of immense value to them. 2 of them are working in the firm. It provides a source and a kind of a base for the family as a whole, and has been, therefore, from their perspective, they say very much worth it, and they all feel very part of it. But it's not perfect, and you can't do that and hope to have the same time with your children that you would have if you weren't working.
I think the main takeaway there is the fact that you say you're all very close. And that's the main point, isn't it? That families are close and that they can be relied upon when it needs to be. There doesn't need to be a constant inner pocket. And you're right, there is a bit of a double standard between what women are expected to do and men. But obviously, given the last 18 months, that's a lot of these things have really come into perspective as well. Home life, working all the time, having children off of school, and COVID-19 has really caused an awful lot of disruption to so many different sectors. And I don't think it would be right for us to do this without touching on it and how it's affected you and your organization, really. So how has that been for you?
Yeah, and there have been huge adjustments we've had to make, because fundamentally we're a firm that works as an apprenticeship culture. We get very bright, very sort of ambitious graduates, and we train them by close contact to people more senior than them who are working on cases, and just the process of being in a group of people that are talking all the time and listening all the time, consulting, and even just listening to the phone calls that people, more senior lawyers, are having is a huge part of the training. So suddenly we had to deal with not having that during lockdown, and that was very tough. Initially, we felt this just isn't going to work at all. But interestingly, over the time, people have adapted more and more. We're finding more ways to kind of keep the community alive, and we massively upgraded. We were already quite geared up for remote working, but we upgraded that, and now we have a system that everybody seems to be very comfortable with. So that now we're thinking, okay, we can carry forward big chunks of this even when lockdown is over, because what people seem to want is a real mix. They want the community of being in the office, that sense of coming in, being part of something, going somewhere away from home to separate their work and their home life, and just the friendship, the camaraderie, the support that you need in work, particularly in stressful work like litigation. So they want that, but do appreciate that more time at home, partly for doing the quiet sort of work that, similar to when I had to lock myself up for 3 weeks and not see anyone to do an affidavit. Sometimes for doing that quiet kind of deep thinking, quite creative work, you want to be on your own. And also, particularly if people are having to travel or whatever, it's just kind of nice a couple of days a week to have that option. So people seem to be, on balance, having canvassed this massively, seem to be happy with the degree of flexibility, but about 3 days in the office. And that is enough to keep a community going and keep training going. And also to give people the sort of happiness of increased. The nature of calls has changed a lot. The other thing I find that's really difficult is you can't really tell what impact things you're doing have. So if you make some rather change or improvement or whatever, you can't really see what the effects are because it's much more dependent on whether there's a lockdown or whether you've just come out of the lockdown or whatever. And that's become the biggest driver of people's behavior. So it's quite difficult to make judgments based on what you're doing within your business when there are such big external forces at play. But, slowly, hopefully things will just settle down. We'll stop having these, lockdowns and then everybody's businesses can just stabilize so that they can see where they're going and how many people they're going to need and what they need to be doing. And I think uncertainty has just been terribly, terribly difficult for our economy. I really think, stability now and, everything to encourage sort of investment and money and people with money back into England will make just the most immense difference because that's what everyone in England needs. The end to the instability and the end to people kind of getting out of England.
Yes, you are absolutely right on that one. Just a brief period, or not brief, but just a period of increased normality back, international travel, getting people back into the office, even partly getting back those conversations that you can have with staff and with business partners and clients, that you get to see the non-verbal cues. You get to feel the emotional response from people, and that's one thing that you obviously can't do, regardless of how good technology has made leaps and bounds in communication over the last 18 months. And it's meant that we've had to touch on sort of mental health across both personally and, making sure that the mental health of workforce is there, because this is all about external pressures. It isn't just about work. It's about what's happening to family, what's happening to, the potentially of future job prospects of learning. And you're right, again, sort of staying in. But, how do you feel you've managed to safeguard the sort of mental health of yourself, of the workforce? How have you sort of adapted to that?
I mean, I think that mental health is always a huge issue with work. And as I say, particularly stressful work. And so much work now is so stressful because so much is required in order to perform in a very competitive environment. But litigation is particularly stressful, as I always say. In litigation, you're not paranoid because the other side really is out to get you. And so it is a very sort of hostile environment often. So you need a lot of support from your colleagues, and you need to keep your mental health very robust. You need to have lots of exercise. You need to be, stay healthy, like not drink too much. And you kind of need to hone yourself like an athlete to be able to stay strong mentally to deal with those pressures. I think it's always a problem. It's more of a problem with COVID, with sort of economic uncertainty. And also, we have had some people who have been kind of overwhelmed by what's happened within their families when they've had, significant losses. That's such a terrible thing to experience. And some people have been very, very personally affected. But I think generally it's very difficult. And I think there's a combination of partly mental health issues being better recognized now and not something that's taboo, and people can accept that people can have those issues and still be very well functioning, and that enables people to talk more freely. But also that that these issues have come up because of problems in society, problems of loneliness and disconnection in relationships, problems of stress, problems of lack of community, and there's so many problems that cause mental health difficulties. And it's a huge problem. It's something I've had to pretty much deal with myself, and I think a higher level of awareness now among the problems that CEOs, founders, presidents, etc. face. I've certainly, historically, I'm someone who's wrestled with depression, and that's been something really throughout my whole life, which is sort of actually helped by I've been working very hard and being very obviously helpful for that, and the work that you can do is have a nice, relaxing life. And but the stress is on you. It's huge because it is that sense of you're responsible for this whole thing. You've built this big edifice, and it's all been built tailored to certain objectives, to certain parameters, because that's what you expect. But that it's effectively always kind of walking a tightrope, because if that dramatically changes, then you're going to have to restructure everything, and it pulls the rug out from under you. So every single decision you make is weighted with that degree of kind of importance and stress and fear, effectively. And if you let it, then the fear can paralyze you and burn you out. And it's something you have to be really, really conscious of. And the biggest thing I found is you just have to take real breaks. There were years I just didn't take any breaks. I always had my phone with me, and I was always doing everything. And as I said, I had I was in the office the next day after my fourth child was born. And it just gets too much, and then you have to say, right, I'm going to have a month that I'm not going to communicate with anyone or see anyone. I'm going to disappear, and you start out with that. Then after a bit, you can kind of manage it and have shorter periods. But recently, I went somewhere to. One of the things I do for recreation is to write creatively, and I went off somewhere and I put my phone literally in the safe in the hotel. And locked it with its password. And of course, I could have gone back and got it, but just locking it in there with its password meant that it was such a mental sort of shutting down and sense of relief that I was actually free of the constant demands for a little bit. And I did that for only 4 days, and it was enough. So it can, but you have to keep having this space. It's so easy just to think, no, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just carry on? And then you end up burning out.
Out of sight, out of mind. And you're right there as well. It's a good chance for a digital detox. But given the challenges of the last 18 months, the changes to the economy and the sort of pressures on young people that are trying to learn and sort of trying to succeed, do you have any particular advice for those that are coming up, those that are finishing university, those that are wanting to look ahead and start planning their own business and their own enterprise?
So the advice I'd have for young people wanting to go into business now or into the law, and particularly for young women, is to, first of all, get yourself really prepared. You really, really know your stuff, and you have confidence in your knowledge and your opinions. And then just really have the courage of your convictions. And if somebody tries to shout you down, assuming that you're not, if you're in a very junior position, obviously you have to be quite humble and just make yourself indispensable and give what you can, but not assert yourself too much. But as soon as you're in a position where you're among peers, and somebody tries to shout you down or not listen to you for whatever reason, which can be because you're a woman, because that's still happening, you just have to be willing to speak louder I mean, I've sometimes been in situations where I've said, no, hold on. And I've kind of thumped the table and said, no, listen to what I'm saying. And which gives everybody a bit of a shock. But then they do listen to you. And sometimes you have to do that a lot more. I don't really have to do it now, but I had to do it a lot more at the beginning of my career before everybody, really took me seriously. And you do have to kind of be that much louder and tougher and more assertive when you're either quite young or you're a woman. So people get that you mean business and you're not willing to be, swept aside or steamrolled over. You just have to, you have to be willing to have a loud voice. You have to be willing to set out opinions. You can't be too fussed about what people think of you. And you just have to know what's right to do and then be very, very clear about putting it out there.
So know your stuff, have a thick skin, but also be forthright in the way that you are putting yourself across and, making sure that you get the most out of the opportunities that are given to you. I think that's some fantastic advice there. But lastly, before we go, with sort of social restrictions easing, if not gone, in England and across the UK, but still with a bit of sort of, uncertainty over the trajectory of the pandemic over the winter periods, what do you see happening for Vardags over the next 12 months? And do you have any personal ambitions going forwards?
The main thing that I want to do is just to achieve stability rather than, because what we found is broadly, work keeps coming, but it's very lumpy. It's like it's quieter when there's a lockdown, then it goes mad, when people come out of lockdown, and and it's very uneven. So people are either a bit quiet or they're massively busy. I really want to achieve stability and the sort of evenness that we used to have, which always has a bit of seasonal variation, but basically is something steady and something you can manage and expect. And that's a good climate within which to build, to invest, to be able to make long-term plans. So that's what I most want to achieve over the next year, is just that good, solid stability, which is the right climate for growth. For me personally, I want to try to achieve a bit more of that elusive work-life balance. And hopefully have got to stay with such a good team around me that I can, just have a little bit more personal time. And that's something I would value immensely.
I think that's something we're all looking for, isn't it, on those two sides? One, just a little bit more time, and two, stability. Yeah. And on that note, Ayesha, I would really like to say thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And it'd be great to hear from you again in the future as well, once we have turned this corner and we can speak in a little bit more depth about how we're looking ahead.
Fantastic. Really look forward to that. Thank you so much.
That was Ayesha Vardag, one of Britain's top solicitors. A really interesting take on her own experiences, how she's got to be where she is, as well as advice for those that are looking ahead to their own futures. This was the Leaders Council podcast, and I'm Joshua Jackson. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode. Goodbye.